Ethan Carter woke to the hum of his alarm in their small Austin apartment, the Texas sun already slicing through the blinds. At 32, he was a graphic designer who thrived on late-night creativity, but mornings were for routine. He shuffled to the kitchen, the scent of brewing coffee filling the air. Sophia, his wife of 3 years, sat at the table, her phone glowing as she scrolled through social media. At 30, she was a marketing assistant with a knack for charming clients, her laughter a spark that often lit up their modest life. Today, though, her eyes flicked up briefly, offering a sleepy smile before returning to her screen. "Coffee's almost ready," Ethan said, stirring sugar into his mug. Sophia nodded, her fingers tapping out a quick reply to a message. They weren't rich, far from it, but their shared dreams of travel and a bigger future kept them grounded. The apartment, though cramped, was a stepping stone, a place to build from. Ethan liked the simplicity. It felt honest. His phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number flashing. He frowned, assuming it was a client with an urgent logo tweak. "Ethan Carter," he answered, his tone steady but curious. "Mr. Carter, this is Michael Grayson, your father's attorney," came a clipped voice. Ethan's grip tightened on the mug. His father, William Carter, was a name tied to a past he'd long buried. They hadn't spoken in years, not since Ethan walked away from the family's expectations to chase his own path. "I'm sorry to inform you," Grayson continued, "but your father passed last night. Heart attack. The funeral's tomorrow in Marfa, West Texas. You're needed for the will reading." The words hit like a punch Ethan didn't see coming. He stood frozen, the phone pressed to his ear. His father gone. The man who'd built a cattle empire, who demanded Ethan follow in his boots, was no more. Memories flashed. Arguments over the ranch, his father's stern voice, the day Ethan left for Austin without looking back. He'd wanted freedom, not a legacy carved in dust and sweat. "Ethan," Sophia's voice cut through. She was standing now, concern creasing her brow. "What's wrong?" He lowered the phone, his voice barely above a whisper. "My dad died." The words felt foreign, heavy. Sophia's eyes widened, and she crossed the room in an instant, wrapping him in a hug. He leaned into her, the warmth of her embrace grounding him as his mind spun. He hadn't expected the ache in his chest, the sudden weight of regret for words never said. "I'm so sorry," Sophia murmured, her hand stroking his back. "What do you need?" "I have to go to Marfa," he said, pulling back to meet her gaze. "The funeral's tomorrow, and there's a will." She nodded, her expression soft but resolute. "I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone." Her tone was firm, and Ethan felt a flicker of gratitude. Sophia had a way of stepping up when it mattered, even if their marriage had its quiet strains, her restlessness, his stubborn independence. They packed light, the drive to Marfa stretching over 6 hours across open highways and sun-scorched plains. Sophia tried to keep things light, chatting about her latest marketing campaign, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere. He stared out the window, the flat landscape stirring memories of his childhood. Summers on the ranch, his father's calloused hands guiding him through the fields. William Carter had been a titan, unyielding, proud of the land that bore their name. Ethan had rejected it all, choosing a life unbound by tradition. Now, that choice felt like a wound that never fully healed. As they neared Marfa, the terrain shifted. Fences lined the road, and fields of cotton and grazing cattle stretched toward the horizon. The Carter Ranch came into view, a sprawling estate that dwarfed Ethan's memories. The main house loomed ahead, its stone facade weathered but grand, a testament to generations of grit. Sophia let out a low whistle. "This is your family's place?" "Ethan, it's huge." "Yeah," he said, his voice tight. "It's been in the family for over a century. My dad's pride and joy." He didn't add how it had also been a cage, one he'd escaped at 18. They pulled up to the house just as dusk settled, the sky streaked with orange. Ranch hands, some familiar from Ethan's youth, greeted him with quiet nods and firm handshakes. "Good to see you, Ethan," said an older worker, his eyes kind but heavy with grief. "Your dad was a good man." Ethan managed a nod, the weight of their respect pressing on him. Sophia stayed close, her hand on his arm, her curiosity evident as she scanned the property. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and history. Ethan avoided lingering, his focus on the task ahead. The funeral was set for morning, a simple service in the ranch's small chapel. Sophia, sensing his mood, squeezed his hand. "We'll get through this," she said, her voice warm. But as she glanced around, her eyes lingered on the vastness of the land visible through the windows, a spark of something new flickering in her gaze. That night, in a guest room that felt too big, Ethan lay awake. Sophia slept beside him, her breathing steady, but his mind churned. He thought of his father's final years, the silence between them, the letters Ethan never answered. Tomorrow, he'd face the man's legacy, both the land and the will. What did William Carter leave behind? And why did Ethan feel like he was stepping into a story he wasn't ready to read? As dawn broke, the chapel filled with a small crowd. Ranch hands, neighbors, a few of William's old friends. Ethan stood at the front, Sophia by his side, her presence a quiet anchor. The priest spoke of William's dedication, his love for the land, his unyielding spirit. Ethan's throat tightened as he stared at the coffin, regret mingling with grief. He'd spent years running from this place, but now it called him back. After the service, the group moved to the house for the will reading. Michael Grayson, the lawyer, waited in the study, a leather folder in hand. Ethan and Sophia sat among a handful of attendees, the air thick with anticipation. Grayson's voice was steady as he began, detailing minor bequests: cash for loyal workers, a truck for a foreman. Then he paused, his eyes locking on Ethan. William Carter's estate, including the Carter Ranch, its lands, cattle, equipment, and all associated assets, valued at approximately $150 million, is bequeathed in its entirety to his son, Ethan Carter. The room went silent. Ethan's pulse quickened, the number staggering. Sophia's hand tightened on his, her nails digging in slightly. He glanced at her, catching a flash of awe in her eyes before she softened it with a smile. "Wow," she whispered, leaning close. "He really trusted you." Ethan didn't respond. The weight of the inheritance settled like a stone in his chest. This wasn't just money. It was a legacy, a responsibility he'd never wanted. As the lawyer continued, outlining contracts and operations, Ethan's mind drifted. He felt Sophia's gaze, her warmth closer now, her questions about the ranch already forming. Something in her tone, eager and sharp, stirred a quiet unease in him. For the first time, he wondered if the woman beside him saw the same future he did. The morning after the funeral, Ethan Carter stood on the porch of the Carter Ranch in Marfa, West Texas, watching the sun climb over the fields. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of hay and earth. At 32, he felt the weight of the $150 million inheritance pressing harder than ever, a sprawling cattle empire his father, William, had poured his life into. Ethan had rejected it once, choosing his own path as a graphic designer in Austin. Now, it was his, whether he wanted it or not. Sophia, his wife of 3 years, emerged from the house, her phone in hand. At 30, she was usually quick with a smile, but today her energy was different, brighter, almost restless. "This place is incredible, Ethan," she said, leaning against the railing. "Have you thought about what you're going to do with it?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes lingered on the horizon, where cattle dotted the fields. "Not really," Ethan replied, sipping his coffee. "It's a lot to take in." He hadn't slept much, his mind tangled with memories of his father's expectations and the sudden responsibility now on his shoulders. Sophia nodded, but her fingers tapped her phone screen, a habit Ethan knew meant she was thinking fast. They stayed at the ranch, settling into a guest wing while Ethan met with foremen and accountants. The operation was vast, thousands of acres, hundreds of cattle, contracts with major distributors. He dove into the work, driven by a need to understand what his father had built. Sophia tagged along at first, asking questions about the ranch's output, the staff, the profits. "You could hire someone to handle all this," she suggested one afternoon, her voice light but pointed. "You don't have to do it all yourself." "I need to know what I'm dealing with," Ethan said, not looking up from a stack of ledgers. Her suggestion lingered, though, and he noticed how she seemed less interested in the details and more in the big picture: numbers, potential, power. A week into their stay, a pickup truck rolled up the dirt drive. A man stepped out, broad-shouldered, with a confident stride. "Caleb Turner," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Neighbor, my land borders yours. Came to pay my respects." His smile was warm, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. Ethan invited him in for coffee, sensing an agenda, but keeping his guard down. Caleb spoke of William with admiration, calling him a legend in the region. Then, smoothly, he shifted gears. Your dad's land is prime. I'd be interested in buying a section, say, 500 acres. I'm prepared to offer $50 million. Ethan shook his head. Not selling. This land's been in my family for generations. His voice was firm, rooted in a loyalty he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. Caleb nodded, unfazed. Fair enough. Just thought I'd put it out there. He left with a handshake, but Ethan caught a flicker of calculation in his expression. Sophia, who'd been listening from the doorway, waited until Caleb's truck disappeared before speaking. $50 million, Ethan. That's life-changing money. She sat across from him, her tone earnest. You could invest it, start something new, maybe that design studio you've always talked about. This isn't about money, Ethan said, meeting her gaze. It's about legacy. My dad built this. I can't just carve it up. Sophia's smile tightened, but she nodded, dropping the subject. Still, Ethan felt a subtle shift, like a crack forming in ground he'd thought was solid. Over the next few days, Sophia's questions grew more frequent. She asked about the ranch's revenue, the cost of maintenance, the potential for expansion. You could modernize it, she said one evening over dinner, her fork gesturing animatedly. Or sell parts and still keep the core. Think about what we could do with that kind of cash. Ethan listened, his jaw tightening. Her enthusiasm felt less like support and more like pressure, each suggestion chipping away at his resolve to honor his father's work. Then came the first real warning. Ethan was reviewing contracts in the ranch office when Caleb returned, this time unannounced. He leaned casually against the doorframe, tossing out small talk before mentioning a detail that stopped Ethan cold. Heard you're a stickler for keeping things traditional, Caleb said with a grin. Something about not wanting to upgrade the irrigation system? Smart, keeping costs low. Ethan froze. He'd only mentioned the irrigation system to Sophia, late one night while discussing the ranch's challenges. It was a private conversation, not something Caleb could have known. You heard that where? Ethan asked, keeping his tone neutral. Caleb shrugged, his grin unwavering. Word gets around. Small town. He changed the subject, but the damage was done. Ethan's mind raced. Had Sophia been talking to Caleb? The thought gnawed at him, a seed of doubt taking root. That evening, Sophia was unusually attentive, suggesting they take a walk to clear his head. As they strolled past the barns, she looped her arm through his. You're working too hard, she said, her voice soft. Maybe Caleb's offer isn't the worst idea. You could keep the house, the legacy, but lighten the load. Ethan didn't respond, his thoughts elsewhere. Her words felt rehearsed, her affection a little too deliberate. The next morning, Ethan drove into town to meet a supplier, leaving Sophia at the ranch. On his way back, his phone buzzed, a text from an old ranch hand, Javier, who'd worked for his father for decades. Need to talk. Urgent. They met at a diner in Marfa, Javier's face grim as he slid into the booth. I saw something you should know, he said, keeping his voice low. Yesterday, at Caleb's place. Sophia was there. They weren't just talking, Ethan. Looked like more than that. Ethan's stomach churned. You sure? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Javier nodded, pulling out his phone. I recorded it. Didn't feel right keeping it from you. He played a short video. Sophia and Caleb outside Caleb's barn, laughing, her hand on his arm, their faces close. Then a kiss, brief but unmistakable. Ethan watched in silence, his hands clenching the table's edge. The diner's noise faded, leaving only the thud of his heartbeat. Thanks, Javier, Ethan said, saving the video to his phone. He drove back to the ranch, the footage replaying in his mind. Sophia's trips to town, her sudden interest in the ranch's finances, her push to sell. It all clicked into place. She wasn't just restless. She was playing a different game, one Ethan hadn't seen coming. Back at the ranch, Sophia greeted him with a smile, asking about his meeting. Ethan forced a nod, his face unreadable. Went fine, he said, his voice calm. Inside, he was piecing together a plan. He wouldn't confront her yet. He needed proof, leverage, and a way to protect what was his. The ranch wasn't just land. It was his father's life, his family's roots. And now, it was a battlefield. Ethan knew one thing for sure. Whatever Sophia and Caleb were planning, he'd be ready. Ethan Carter sat in the dim light of the ranch office, the glow of his laptop casting shadows across the desk. It was late, the Marfa night quiet except for the distant hum of crickets. The video from Javier, the ranch hand, looped silently on the screen, Sophia and Caleb, laughing, kissing, oblivious to the camera. Ethan's chest tightened, but his mind was clear. At 32, he'd learned to channel hurt into action. The $150 million Carter Ranch, his father's legacy, was at stake, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. Sophia was asleep in the guest wing, unaware of the storm brewing. Since Javier's revelation 2 days ago, Ethan had kept his distance, playing the part of a grieving son overwhelmed by responsibility. He answered her questions with vague nods, his eyes sharp for any slip in her behavior. She'd been more affectionate, her smiles frequent, her suggestions about the ranch's future relentless. You could sell a parcel and still run the core operation, she'd said that morning, her tone almost rehearsed. Ethan had murmured agreement, watching her closely. The seed of doubt planted by Caleb's slip about the irrigation system had grown into certainty. Sophia was working with Caleb, and the $50 million offer was just the start. Ethan's first move was to call Michael Grayson, his father's lawyer, in Austin. Over a secure line, he explained the situation, Sophia's meetings with Caleb, the video, the suspicious push to sell. "I need to protect the ranch," Ethan said, his voice steady. "And I need to know my options." Grayson was blunt. "You signed a prenup. That's your shield. If Sophia is colluding with this guy, we can build a case. Alienation of affection, maybe fraud. But you'll need more evidence." Ethan hung up, already planning his next steps. He'd installed security cameras across the ranch after taking over, a precaution for a property this size. Now they'd be his eyes. The next day, Caleb returned, his pickup kicking up dust as it rolled up the drive. Ethan met him outside, keeping his expression neutral. "Back again?" Ethan asked, leaning against a fence post. Caleb grinned, all charm. "Just checking in. Thought you might have had time to mull over my offer." He leaned closer, dropping his voice. "Sophia mentioned you're feeling the pressure. $50 million could take that weight off." Ethan's pulse spiked. Sophia had been feeding Caleb details, but he kept his cool. "Not interested," he said, his tone final. Caleb shrugged, unfazed, and drove off. Ethan watched him go, then headed to the security hub in the barn. He pulled up footage from the past week, focusing on the gate and perimeter. Sure enough, Sophia's car had left the ranch 3 times, each trip aligning with her errands in town. Ethan cross-referenced the timestamps with Caleb's visits. One matched perfectly. Sophia had returned just minutes after Caleb's second visit. It wasn't proof of collusion, but it was close. That evening, Sophia suggested dinner in Marfa, a rare night out. Ethan agreed, wanting to test her. At the diner, she was all smiles, chatting about the ranch's potential, even mentioning Caleb's offer again. "He seems like he'd be fair," she said, sipping her iced tea. "You can negotiate, keep control, but cash out enough for us." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. Her words were too polished, her insistence too pointed. He changed the subject, but his mind was on the trap he was setting. The next morning, Ethan drove to meet Javier again, this time at a gas station outside town. Javier handed over a USB drive. "More footage," he said. "Caught it yesterday at Caleb's place." "Same deal." Sophia was there. Ethan plugged the drive into his laptop in the truck. The new video was clearer. Sophia and Caleb outside Caleb's house, her hand on his chest, their laughter intimate. Ethan's stomach churned, but he saved the file. "Thanks, Javier. Keep this quiet." Javier nodded, loyal to the Carter name. Back at the ranch, Ethan called Grayson again, sending him the videos. "This enough?" he asked. Grayson's response was immediate. "It's strong. We can file for divorce and start building a case against Caleb for alienation of affection. The videos show intent. If he's pushing to buy the land through her, we might even get fraud." Ethan gave the go-ahead, his resolve hardening. He'd confront Sophia soon, but first, he needed to secure the ranch. That afternoon, Sophia announced another trip to town. "Just need some air," she said, kissing his cheek. Ethan watched her car disappear down the drive, then checked the cameras. Sure enough, she headed straight to Caleb's property. Ethan didn't follow, and he didn't need to. The cameras and Javier's intel were enough. Instead, he met with the ranch's head foreman, Maria, a no-nonsense woman who'd worked for his father for 20 years. "I need you to double-check our contracts and inventory," he told her. "No one outside the core team gets access." Maria nodded, sensing the stakes without needing details. Hours later, Sophia returned, her mood buoyant. "Town was great," she said, setting a bag of pastries on the counter. "Found this cute bakery." Ethan forced a smile, his mind elsewhere. That night, he barely slept, his thoughts on the confrontation ahead. Sophia's betrayal wasn't just personal. It threatened everything his family had built. The ranch was more than land. It was his father's life, his legacy. Ethan wouldn't let it fall to greed. The breaking point came the next evening. Ethan was in the office when an alert pinged his phone, a motion sensor at the main barn. He pulled up the live feed. Caleb, alone, creeping along the barn's edge with a gasket in hand. Ethan's blood ran cold. He hit the silent alarm, alerting the security company and the sheriff. Then he grabbed a flashlight and headed out, keeping low. He wasn't confronting Caleb directly. That was too risky, but he needed eyes on the situation. From a distance, Ethan watched Caleb douse the barn's base, the smell of gasoline sharp in the air. The barn, a century-old structure, held tools, records, and memories of his grandfather's time. Caleb fumbled with a lighter, his movements frantic. Before he could strike it, sirens wailed. A sheriff's cruiser roared up, lights flashing. Deputies tackled Caleb, cuffing him as he shouted about his rights. Ethan stayed in the shadows, his heart pounding. The cameras had caught everything. As the deputies hauled Caleb away, Ethan returned to the house. Sophia was in the kitchen, her phone in hand, oblivious to the chaos. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light. Ethan met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "Not exactly," he said, pulling out his phone. He didn't play the video yet. He'd save that for the right moment. But the divorce papers were already being drafted, and Caleb's arrest would seal the case. Ethan was done playing naive. The ranch and his father's legacy would stay his. And Sophia's game was about to end. The morning after Caleb's arrest, Ethan Carter stood outside the Carter Ranch's main barn, the scent of gasoline still lingering in the West Texas air. The sheriff's report confirmed what the security cameras had captured. Caleb Turner, caught mid-act, trying to burn down the historic structure. Handcuffed and furious, he'd been hauled to the Marfa jail, charged with attempted arson and trespassing. Ethan, 32, felt a grim satisfaction. The $150 million ranch, his father's legacy, was safe, but the fight wasn't over. Sophia, his wife, was still in the house, unaware of how much he knew. Ethan hadn't confronted her yet. The videos from Javier, showing her kissing Caleb, burned in his mind, but he needed to move carefully. The prenup she'd signed protected the ranch, and his lawyer, Michael Grayson, was building a case for divorce and a lawsuit against Caleb for alienation of affection. Ethan spent the morning with Maria, the head foreman, reviewing security protocols. "No one gets near the barns or offices without clearance," he told her. Maria nodded, her loyalty to the Carter family unwavering. "We've got your back," she said, her voice steady. Sophia was in the kitchen when Ethan returned, scrolling her phone over a cup of coffee. At 30, she'd always been quick to charm, but now her warmth felt calculated. "Heard about some trouble last night," she said, her tone curious but cautious. "Something about the barn?" Ethan studied her, searching for a crack in her facade. "Yeah," he said, keeping his voice even. "Someone tried to torch it. Sheriff got him." Her eyes flicked up, a fleeting tension crossing her face before she masked it with a nod. "That's awful. Who would do that?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he excused himself to the office, where he called Grayson. "Caleb's arrest strengthens our case," Grayson said. "The videos, the supplier's testimony. Now this, it's a pattern. He's not just after your wife. He's after the ranch. We'll file the divorce papers and the lawsuit by tomorrow." Ethan sent the barn footage to Grayson, adding it to the evidence pile. The lawsuit would hit Caleb hard, targeting his interference in Ethan's marriage with a claim for moral and financial damages. By noon, news of Caleb's arrest had spread through Marfa. Ethan's phone buzzed with texts from ranch hands and neighbors, some offering support, others gossiping. A local news site posted a brief article. "Local rancher arrested in arson attempt on Carter property." Ethan skimmed it, noting Caleb's name plastered across the headline. The public humiliation was already sinking in, but Ethan wasn't done. He wanted justice, not just revenge, clean, legal, and final. That afternoon, Sophia suggested a drive into town. "Clear our heads," she said, her smile tight. Ethan declined, citing ranch work. As her car pulled away, he checked the security feed. Her route led straight to Caleb's property, just as he'd suspected. He didn't follow. He had enough evidence. Instead, he met with Maria and Javier to discuss the ranch's operations. "We're locking down access," he told them. "No visitors, no exceptions." Javier handed over another USB drive. "Caught her again this morning," he said. "Same spot." Ethan pocketed it without watching. He trusted Javier's word. The divorce papers arrived by courier that evening. Ethan sat Sophia down at the kitchen table, the envelope in hand. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. Sophia's smile faltered as he slid the papers toward her. "What's this?" she asked, her tone sharp. Ethan didn't flinch. "Divorce. I know about you and Caleb." He pulled out his phone and played Javier's first video. Her and Caleb outside his barn, kissing, laughing. Sophia's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan cut her off. "There's more. You've been meeting him, pushing his offer to buy the land. It's over." Sophia's eyes darted to the papers, then back to Ethan. "This is a mistake," she stammered. "I was confused, Ethan. I love you." Her voice cracked, but Ethan saw through the act. "You signed the prenup," he said. "The ranch stays mine. Pack your things. I want you gone by tonight." She tried to argue, tears streaming, but Ethan stood and walked out. He didn't need her explanations. They were as hollow as her promises. By dusk, Sophia was gone, driven to the bus station by Javier. Ethan watched the taillights fade, a weight lifting but not disappearing. The betrayal stung, but the ranch was secure. He spent the night reviewing Grayson's lawsuit draft. The alienation of affection claim detailed Caleb's calculated moves, using Sophia to pressure Ethan into selling, undermining his marriage for profit. The videos, Javier's testimony, and the arson attempt painted a damning picture. Grayson estimated a potential $1 million in damages, enough to hit Caleb where it hurt. Sophia, meanwhile, arrived in Dallas, crashing at her parents' cramped apartment. The city's noise was a stark contrast to the ranch's open silence. Her old room, cluttered with boxes, felt like a step backward. She scrolled through job listings, her savings thin, her dreams of wealth shattered. Caleb's arrest had hit the news, and texts from old friends buzzed with questions she couldn't answer. She'd gambled on a shortcut, Caleb's charm, his promises, and lost everything. The prenup left her with nothing but regret. Caleb, out on bail, faced his own fallout. The lawsuit papers arrived the next day, and Marfa's tight-knit community turned cold. His suppliers hesitated, his contracts wobbled, and his reputation as a savvy rancher crumbled. He'd underestimated Ethan, assuming a city designer couldn't match his cunning. Now, he was staring down a legal battle he couldn't charm his way out of. Ethan, back at the ranch, threw himself into work. He met with Maria to streamline operations, hired a manager to handle paperwork, and began digitizing the ranch's records. The barn, spared from Caleb's fire, stood as a symbol of what he'd protected. He wasn't his father, but he was starting to understand the man's drive to hold the land together. Late that night, Ethan stood outside, the stars bright above the fields. The lawsuit would move forward, and Caleb would pay. Sophia was gone, her betrayal a lesson Ethan wouldn't forget. The ranch was his now, not just by inheritance, but by choice. He'd fight for it, not out of anger, but because it was his to defend. Ethan Carter stood on the edge of the Carter Ranch's northern field, the West Texas sun climbing high over Marfa's endless horizon. At 32, he'd weathered a storm. His wife Sophia's betrayal, Caleb Turner's schemes, and an arson attempt that nearly cost him his family's $150 million legacy. Now, with Sophia gone and Caleb facing justice, Ethan was ready to close this chapter. The ranch, his father's life's work, was his to shape, and he was determined to honor it with integrity, not vengeance. The divorce was finalized swiftly thanks to the prenup Sophia had signed. She'd left the ranch that night, driven to the bus station by Javier, a loyal ranch hand. Ethan hadn't looked back, focusing instead on the lawsuit against Caleb for alienation of affection. His lawyer, Michael Grayson, had built an airtight case. Videos of Sophia and Caleb's affair, Javier's testimony, the arson attempt caught on camera, and Caleb's own words about Ethan's private conversations. The evidence pointed to a calculated plan to destabilize Ethan's marriage and pressure him into selling the ranch. The trial took place in a Marfa courthouse 2 months later. Ethan sat in the front row, his face calm but resolute. Caleb, out on bail, looked diminished, his usual swagger replaced by a tense scowl. The small courtroom buzzed with locals, the scandal fueling gossip across town. Grayson presented the case with precision, showing the videos and detailing Caleb's $50 million offer for the ranch's land. Mr. Turner didn't just pursue an affair, Grayson argued. He targeted Ethan Carter's marriage to manipulate a business deal. The jury, mostly ranchers and small business owners, listened intently. Sophia wasn't called to testify. She'd vanished to Dallas, cutting contact, but her role was clear. The videos showed her complicity, her trips to Caleb's property aligning with his visits to the ranch. When the arson footage played, gasps rippled through the room. Caleb's lawyer argued he'd acted alone, driven by frustration, not a conspiracy, but the jury wasn't swayed. After a day of deliberation, they awarded Ethan $2 million in damages for emotional and financial harm. The verdict sent a message: betrayal had a price. Caleb's fall was swift. The damages drained his accounts, and his reputation in Marfa crumbled. Suppliers pulled contracts, and his ranch's output faltered. Local diners and feed stores buzzed with talk of his arrest, the lawsuit, and his failed scheme. Caleb kept a low profile, his truck rarely seen in town. Ethan didn't revel in it. He'd wanted accountability, not destruction. The money, wired to his account, felt secondary to the ranch's safety. Sophia, meanwhile, was rebuilding in Dallas. Her parents' cramped apartment was a far cry from the Carter Ranch's sprawling fields. At 30, she faced a harsh reality: no savings, no claim to Ethan's wealth, and a stained reputation. Job applications for marketing roles went unanswered. Her affair with Caleb, now public, followed her like a shadow. She landed a part-time gig at a retail store, the hours grueling, the pay barely covering rent. Late at night, scrolling through old photos of her life with Ethan, she grappled with regret. She'd traded love for a mirage, believing Caleb's promises of wealth and power. Now, she was starting from zero, her ambition a lesson in consequences. Ethan threw himself into the ranch, finding purpose in its rhythms. He worked closely with Maria, the head foreman, to streamline operations. They upgraded irrigation systems, not because Sophia had suggested it, but because it made sense for the land. He hired a financial manager to handle contracts, freeing him to focus on strategy. The ranch hands, loyal to his father's memory, rallied behind him. Javier, who'd risked much to expose Sophia, became a trusted advisor. Ethan rewarded him with a raise and a new role overseeing security. One afternoon, Ethan drove to a local community center in Marfa, a check for $200,000 in hand. He donated it to fund youth programs and equipment for local farmers, a gesture that honored his father's belief in community. The news spread, earning him quiet respect from neighbors who'd once seen him as the son who ran away. He wasn't trying to buy loyalty. He was building a future, one rooted in the values his father had instilled, even if they'd clashed over them. The ranch itself thrived. Ethan walked the fields daily, checking cattle and crops, learning the land's needs. The barn, spared from Caleb's fire, became a symbol of resilience. He found himself thinking less of Sophia's betrayal and more of his father's legacy. William Carter had been rigid, demanding, but he'd built something enduring. Ethan, once desperate to escape, now saw the ranch as his own, a place to forge meaning, not just wealth. Months later, a letter arrived from a lawyer in Dallas. Sophia had written, not to beg or apologize, but to acknowledge her mistakes. "I thought I was chasing a better life," she wrote. "I was wrong. You deserve better." Ethan read it once, then set it aside. Her words didn't heal the wound, but they closed the door. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. His peace came from the land, from the work, from knowing he'd protected what mattered. Caleb's final blow came quietly. His ranch, crippled by debt and lost contracts, went up for sale. Ethan didn't bid. He had no interest in expanding at Caleb's expense. Instead, a co-op of local farmers bought it, turning it into a shared resource. Marfa's community moved on, But Caleb's name faded, a cautionary tale whispered over coffee at the diner. Ethan stood on the ranch's porch one evening, the stars bright above the fields. The weight of the past year, grief, betrayal, victory, settled into something solid. He wasn't his father, but he was a Carter, and this land was his home. Sophia and Caleb had gambled on greed and lost. Ethan had bet on integrity and won. The ranch, once a burden, was now his purpose, a legacy he'd carry forward, not for revenge, but for himself.